Check
Dragon
again.
Ball refuses to move forward. That boy forgot his intro, boy. Anyway, we got Dragon Ball refuse to move forward. Let me know if you think Dragon Ball really does refuse to move forward. I think it does personally, but let me know what y'all think in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe if you're new. Let's get to it, bro.
Weebhead. Our research says we slap Dragon
Oh, shout out to my guy, Black and Fist. Shout out to.
Ball on anything and you'll gobble it up. And for that, you'll be lucky you're getting this. I need new stories. I missed the part where that's my problem. Greetings, beautiful friends from around the world. It calls to my attention that it's the 40th anniversary of Dragon Ball, and as any good occasion, we finally get our first event, our first sneak preview into what's to come. After years of wait, we finally got the Moro arc that everyone was waiting for. It is something that people have been clamoring for years. I remember quite distinctively that when Daima was announced, there was quite the begrudging reaction when that was announced instead of what we got now, finally. So we got it, Dragon Ball Super Galactic Patrol. I'm sure many people are ecstatic at this announcement, and it's quite frankly the natural announcement to make. It's the one that makes the most sense. The material has been around for years, and it's a no-brainer for Dragon Ball to go in this direction. Now, I don't want to go through what I really think about the Moro story. To make a long story short, I have my criticisms of Moro, but quite frankly, even though I'm not the biggest fan of those stories, including Granola, that doesn't matter anymore. It's fine that they were going to adapt this material. Even though I was never the biggest fan of Moro, I'm quite relieved when I initially saw the reveal that they were going to do this material, because as anyone who's been keeping up with the Dragon Ball rumor mills, there were rumors of a Dragon Ball Super remake, and that of course was pretty much confirmed as well, which is quite interesting because it was announced, I don't know, like a month ago that we were going to get two huge announcements. And the other announcement on top of Dragon Ball Super Galactic Patrol was Dragon Ball Super Beerus, the infamous Dragon Ball Super remake. Or is it really? That remains to be seen, especially considering the name. Now, because I've been absent, I haven't spoken on what I think about the prospects of a Dragon Ball Super remake, and I will say that I was vehemently, and that's to put it lightly, opposed to the idea of remaking Dragon Ball Super for many reasons, which is why when I heard that they were going to make Moro, Dragon Ball Super Galactic Patrol, I was quite relieved, quite frankly. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of that material, I'm relieved that at least we're going.
I don't know, from all the meat eat I've seen surrounding Moro, best arc in Dragon Ball Super, from all the meat eat, I mean, I feel like it's not that hard to beat the best arc in Super, but I plan on reading Moro though before this probably gets animated.
Getting new material. One of the biggest problems I've always had with the revival era, the Dragon Ball Renaissance, whatever you want to call it, is that it's over-reliance on old material. This has been going on since Resurrection F, you know, Frieza was an old villain, they brought him back. I think Dragon Ball Super fell into many of those same pitfalls, and it's done it over and over again. Dragon Ball Super Broly, Super Hero, even Daima. Now, of course, a lot of these things have brought new things to the table. It's not entirely like they were rehashing old ideas, but I feel like I've gotten fatigued on the reliance on old ideas. I think that, let me put it this way, back in 2015, when Dragon Ball Super was first announced, the very first time we heard about it, I was of course excited, and I was immediately disappointed that Dragon Ball Super was going to begin with an adaptation of the Battle of Gods movie. Back then I thought, why are we doing this? I mean, this is an opportunity to do better things, or at the very least new things, explore uncharted territory, and why are we wasting our time with this adaptation? Little did I know back then that basically the new Dragon Ball era was going to be littered with this over and over and over again of just going back to doing the same thing over again or reusing same ideas over again. It's like one of the things that I think is the biggest weaknesses of this new material. And look, I guess I'm going to sound a little curmudgeon-y, I'm going to sound a little grumpy here, but if I was disappointed with Dragon Ball Super starting with an adaptation of Battle of Gods in 2015, Quite frankly, I don't feel any differently. In fact, it's even worse now. We've already seen an adaptation in the anime.
Like, I don't know, man. That was terrible. How you gonna do a retelling of you already made you already made two movies of Resurrection F and Battle of Gods, and you try to make an adaptation to make it in the anime, and it's somehow worse. Like, how is that even possible? How is it possible to the adaptation?
We've seen a manga version.
Battle of Gods is the best. Nah, Dragon Ball Super Broly is the best Dragon Ball movie, and then it's Battle of the Gods, and then it's Battle of the Gods was my top Dragon Ball movie of all time back in the day, but now it's been replaced by Broly.
I don't see the point of doing an
Then I watched
adaptation
Dragon Ball Super. That shit was garbage. It was garbage,
of
dude.
this
Slop.
material, which
Slop.
isn't that old. I will always take new horizons over retreading old ground, even if those new horizons isn't exactly what I want, or I think it's not the best story.
I don't understand what he's trying to say though, because manga only content isn't primarily old. Just because it's old in manga sense, we've never seen Moro animated before. Like, I get Super Saiyan 4 Goku, right? Oh, we already have a Super Saiyan 4 Goku. Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta is completely new. I feel like that's getting less hype than Super Saiyan 4, right? But Super Saiyan 4, I get that, right? It's kind of an old thing. The old design, in my opinion, looks better than new Daima version, right? That's my opinion, but I don't know.
10 out of
Like the new manga, granola and Moro and stuff like that. That's new content. I
10
don't
times,
understand.
especially now, I will take the new story. But wait, folks, it's even worse, because apparently Dragon Ball Super Beerus isn't really a 100% remake. What I mean is that it's clearly using the same base footage from Dragon Ball Super, so there's
Just
a
left
lot of
that in the bottom.
redraws, there's a lot of recompositioning, and then a lot of effects work that has been added to the old show to really spruce up the old footage. And yes, there's apparently going to be new cuts to the show. There's probably going to be like brand new from the ground up animation, but overall, this new show is basically a more extensive Kai because the old footage is going to be used as a base. When I first saw the trailer, I did notice the similarities with Tadayoshi Yamamuro, and I was thinking,
I mean, yeah, I kind of get it. Like, think a little bit. We could have waited a little bit longer to get a remake, right? Because we have Dragon Ball Z and we have Dragon Ball Z Kai. A lot of people forget about Kai, but I grew up off of Kai, and Kai was fire because new animation style, fights look cleaner, it looks better. There's more information put into the story, right? And than the original take, right? So I don't necessarily disagree with a Dragon Ball Super remake. I think it's gonna be cool, right? We might see Super Saiyan Goku Black. We might see Gamma Burst Flash, some other stuff that was manga only, or we might see Gohan versus Kefla now. You know, so we might see manga only stuff finally get more love.
thinking that maybe the reason why they're doing that is because they're trying to stay faithful to the way the original looked. Well, unfortunately, I learned very quickly that it looks very similar to the old show because it basically is the old show, just with a new coat of paint on. Once again, this just is more indicative of Dragon Ball refusing to really move on. So this might not be as bad as Kai, and this isn't an insult to Kai, it's just that Kai was just a edited version of Dragon Ball Z. It really wasn't a new show. And I hear so many times Dragon Ball Kai, and even this now, being compared to Full Metal Alchemist, because Full Metal Alchemist had two versions of it. One version that was anime original, where they basically ended the series in a unique way, and Brotherhood, which was a more manga faithful adaptation. Folks, Dragon Ball fans have to really stop using this comparison. It is not like Full Metal Alchemist. Full Metal Alchemist...
It's kind of like Full Metal Alchemist, dude. It's kind of like Full Metal Alchemist or Hunter x Hunter.
Is a different show. it is not the same show as the original Fullmetal Alchemist 2003. It has a different story. It was completely reanimated from the ground up. It was basically a new production through and through. Comparing that to Dragon Ball Kai is a joke in my opinion. Dragon Ball Super Beerus is apparently a halfway house where basically a re-edited version of Dragon Ball Super for what it looks like, but they're going to add a couple new things, which I guess makes it better than Dragon Ball Kai in that respect, but it still is pathetic in my opinion. It's pathetic
Bro, what do you want me? What do you want them to do? What do you want them to do?
because Dragon Ball and its story and its concepts reuses old things. Future Trunks comes back from the future because it has been destroyed by a great threat. We, for some reason, had to do this over again in Super. We had to bring back Broly. We had to bring back things like Super Saiyan 4. And I'm not saying all these things are bad. Individually, they can be fine. What I'm saying is that all these things together, all of these reused things, callbacks to earlier moments in the series, like, do you remember Super Saiyan 2 Gohan in the superhero movie? Do you remember this? We're going to do this again. Putting all of these things together accumulatively does degrade the entire series, in my opinion, because it shows a refusal to move on. It shows a refusal to explore uncharted horizons. And now, even in the drawings themselves, even in the animation themselves, we can't even do something entirely new. Dragon Ball cannot do something entirely new. When hearing first of the rumors of a Dragon Ball Super remake, the one saving grace is that it's going to be an entirely new production. It is going to be a ground-up remake. So at the very least, even though the story might be old, we might be getting something new from the ground up in terms of the visuals. But we can't even get that. We can't even get a ground-up remake of this material. It's still regurgitating the old stuff. One of the side effects of using the old footage as a base for this new quote-unquote remake is that it's going to share that old Tadayoshi Yamamuro Dragon Ball Super style. Now, I remember when Dragon Ball Super Broly came out, we were all elated. Tadayoshi Yamamuro's character designs were not going to be followed. We got new character designs, and quite frankly, it was for the best. Dragon Ball Super Broly and Daima looked much better than Dragon Ball Super, and it wasn't just because of the animation. Just in its character designs, they were better. Tadayoshi Yamamuro, unfortunately, while he was great in the 90s, his style truly wasn't the best that Dragon Ball could have looked. That creates a problem for this new show. Although, yes, it does look better, it almost feels like we're taking a step back in art. And I know that's weird to say in relation to art, but I feel like we were past this Tadayoshi Yamamuro era of character designs, but apparently we're not, because they want to remake it, but they don't want to actually remake it. They want to half-ass it like they have been doing with Dragon Ball for forever at this point. Using the old Dragon Ball Super footage also creates another problem, though. Not only are they reusing the art and the storyboard and composition of the old series, but they're also reusing a lot of the old plot points. Now, once again, I understand that there's going to be things added, but because the old show is a base, they can't stray too far away from what the old show did in terms of how it adapted the material in terms of the story, plot, and characters. Once again, if they truly wanted to do something truly unique for this adaptation, they would have to, I emphasize, have to do a ground-up remake. But that is not what this is. Meaning that a lot of the old stuff, even if it's going to be modified, even if things are going to be added to it, are still going to be the same thing. Dragon Ball simply cannot move on. It seems forever stuck regurgitating the old stuff. Now, people might be saying at this point, why Black and Fist? Why get so worked up? Or why not just be happy that we're getting something new at all? To that sentiment, I always have to say, I can't help but think of how Toei Animation manages Dragon Ball. For instance, why waste money or resources on this half-assed remake? Why do that at all when it could be put to use doing Dragon Ball Super Galactic Patrol? Because they're going to be doing Dragon Ball Super Beerus and maybe even perhaps, I'll talk about this a little later, Resurrection F and maybe the entire Dragon Ball Super story, that is going to delay the new material, which is what really matters. It just doesn't make sense to me. And when I heard the rumors, it truly didn't make sense to me. I haven't heard good arguments for why remaking the Battle of Gods arc or Dragon Ball Super is a good idea. Because quite frankly, I don't think there is a good argument for remaking Dragon Ball Super. The best argument is that people need a refresher for some reason. This to me is a silly point. When the Dragon Ball Kai, the final chapters were coming out, it's not like Toei Animation needed to do a ground-up, half-assed remake or re-air Dragon Ball Kai, the original, just to catch everyone up. No, they didn't. They immediately started airing it right at the beginning of the Buu arc. They didn't need a refresher then. There's also the example of countless other shows. Whenever they get a continuation or a season 2 after a long period of time, it's not like there is going to be a recap or they're going to remake the previous material because people are going to forget. No. The other argument I hear all the time is, well, don't you remember Dragon Ball Super Episode 5? How much of a disaster that was. And you know what? That makes sense. When I say that makes sense, I mean it makes sense in terms of the way Toei thinks, because I still don't think this justifies remaking Dragon Ball Super. But yes, Dragon Ball Super had production issues. It had an incredibly rushed production, and the production fell apart in Episode 5. Although Episode 5 is the most infamous, there are other examples. Perhaps Toei Animation, Ioku, whoever the powers that
is
might
not
be,
Goku,
they want to
bro.
rectify this mistake by basically taking the old footage and sprucing it up a bit. Is that a justifiable reason? Even still, I say I don't think so. However, if Ioku or Toei Animation truly wants to do a remake because they want to vindicate themselves, then I think it might be justified to do some of Dragon Ball Super, but not all of it. Yes, you could always say Dragon Ball Super could have been better in its animation. Quite frankly, you could say any show could be better in its animation. We are talking about television anime here.
I don't understand Dragon Ball Super. You would have moments like this in the anime,
Show could be better.
like peak animation, bro. Peak animation, and then you go back, you go back to a random episode.
Then I think it might be justified to do some of Dragon Ball Super, but not all of it.
Like, bro, I don't know, man. Some episodes were really, really good. You could tell when they gave effort, and then some were just terrible.
Yes, you could always say Dragon
The
Ball Super
majority
could
were
have been
just
better in its
average animations
Quite
at
frankly,
best.
You could say any show could be better in its animation. We are talking about television anime here, the content. But even if we were to cut out this content, it's not making it more faithful to the original material, because quite frankly, Dragon Ball Super, for all intents and purposes, is the original material. Dragon Ball Super isn't based on the Dragon Ball Super manga. Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z are not. They are clearly adaptations of the Dragon Ball manga, and one of the things a Dragon Ball remake has is that it could truly be a more faithful adaptation of the Dragon Ball manga in anime form. The thing that will inevitably be brought up is, of course, Dragon Ball Kai. But Kai was a halfway measure. Because Dragon Ball Kai wasn't really a new show, it just used footage from Dragon Ball Z and just re-edited it. It still was constrained by the constraints of Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z had a lot of filler. And because it had a lot of filler and a lot of anime original content, Dragon Ball Kai couldn't easily cut out all of the anime original content. It couldn't really restructure the series to more faithfully adapt the manga because it was still constrained by that old footage. This is something an actual ground-up remake would not have. Something else that should be mentioned is, of course, that even if you want to include Kai, Kai doesn't include the entire series. There's a whole Dragon Ball that never received that treatment, so even if you want to include that, it's still not the entire series. So anyway, those are a couple reasons why there are a lot more things going for a Dragon Ball remake instead of a Dragon Ball Super one. Ultimately, the question for me is, Why are we spending resources on this when we could be spending resources on new stories, new material, new horizons? It's once again the trap that I think newer Dragon Ball is falling into, which is relying a lot on old stuff. And now at this point, we're relying on the new old stuff, like Battle of Gods. Yeah, that was the beginning of the new stuff, and now we're going back to even that, which I can't help but find disappointing. Anyway, those are my rambling thoughts. Thanks for hearing my ravings. Farewell.
What the freak? Anyway, W video, man. W video. Let me know what y'all think about Dragon Ball Super Remake. Is it gonna be heat? Is it gonna be trash? Is it a waste of time? Could they be working on Moro? I don't know, man. You just gotta let me know in the comments. Love y'all. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Share the video with your friends, family, whatnot. Make sure to check out my last video. If you need a video to watch, I got you. And I'm out, man. I'm out.